My dear young friends from Kerala, I am utterly delighted to learn that you are undertaking this important initiative as this awful COVID year draws to an end, and that it will be climaxed, your campaign will be climaxed by a march that you will be undertaking at the end of January. I am told that the object of this campaign and the march is to spread awareness for the need to ensure individuality for every human being, and also to ensure that skills are acquired for coping with the current world situation. Now, these are not incompatible objectives. It is very important to free the mind from what our national poet Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore called the dreary desert sands of dead habit. And that can only be done by enabling each individual to bring forth his individual personality. There is a tendency in our country which is happily decreasing, but it's still there in very strong measure, where parents decide to orient the young man's or the young woman's mind, where teachers teach by rote. That is, you mug up whatever it is that has been given to you and you just vomit it out on the examination table. That does not provide for the growth of the individual. The individual can only grow by using his or her creative faculties. It would be wonderful if anyone among you who has a capacity for writing, either prose or poetry, or for drawing, painting, music. There are so many different avenues through which you can acquire your freedom to think, because the freedom to think is the predecessor to any significant freedom of expression. So unless your mind is open, unless your soul is open, unless your heart is open, it is not possible to be creative in any line of activity. Tradition is of course important, and the culture you inherited is of course important, but you cannot allow yourselves to drown in that inheritance. The inheritance has to be like a platform on which you can further build, and it is the contribution that you make in your lives to the common inheritance of mankind that will determine whether your life has been of use or not. There is a line of poetry from the 19th century which perhaps you could reflect on. The lines are that lives of great men all remind us we must make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints in the sands of time. Now you can only leave footprints in the sands of time if your ankles are able to detach themselves from the iron holding of the past. They have to be your footprints. And for you to have your own footprints, it is essential that while you recognize what you have inherited from the past, you have the freedom to also walk on your own. Now this might involve you in clashes with the older generation, with your parents, with your teachers, with your other mentors. But unless you acquire the capacity to think on your own, to be on your own, it is not possible, in my view, to be creative. Also, if you remain mired in the past, then it obscures your ability to either look to the future or to make your own contribution to the future. You have to become what you are. You're an individual. You are not just a son or a daughter. You're not a student or only a student. You're not only someone seeking to be part of a fan following. This, of course, means that as you break the shackles of the past and move forward in your own direction, there could be clashes between your parents and yourself, between your teachers and yourself, between the boss in your office and yourself. Yes, that is possible. In fact, it is probable. But if you allow, if you are frightened of facing obstacles or answering criticism, then you'll never attain your individuality. And if no one ever clashes with you, then it means you are extremely conformist. You're not an individual. So while I wouldn't recommend your inviting controversy, I think you should recognize that controversy will involve you if you exercise your own mind. And you must then have the intellectual capacity to be able to do one of two things. If you feel, one is to stand up for whatever you believe in. One is to provide yourself with an armory of arguments as to why what you are saying is correct, and you cannot accept any fundamental change in your position. The other is also, it's a sister of this, but it's the opposite in some ways. It is the capacity to adjust and accommodate. Because it might turn out, and it will turn out at the beginning, that your arguments do not cover all aspects of the issue. And there, if you have the courage to change your mind, not because you're being bullied into changing your mind, but because you yourself are convinced that the counter argument being placed has some merit in it, then we can move ahead. In other words, any clash with the antithesis has to be followed by a synthesis. There has to be common agreement in order to get things done. But very often, the path to consensus is strewn with differences, arguments, fights. So therefore, be ready. Be ready to face controversy. Be ready to face opposition. Be ready to face criticism. Because if you do exercise your own mind, then all this is bound to happen. And yet if you don't exercise your own mind, you will be like a vegetable, just accepting whatever it is that fate serves up. So therefore, being an individual, in order to be creative, in order to make your own contribution to whatever has come to you from the past, is a very important requirement. At the same time, I would warn against most individuals, not all, most individuals simply swimming against the tide. You can be just yourself if you are, for instance, a dancer, or if you are a musician, or if you're a painter. But if you are involved in community activity, if you have to acquire a work culture, then it's extremely important to accept that if you have an individuality, so do the people you live with or work with or play with. Now, if in a football team, say, one person were to start disobeying the rules or not play along with the team or not listen to the captain or keep the ball to himself without passing it, then the match can't be won. There are many activities in human life which require a collective effort, but it should be a collective effort of individuals, not a collective effort of a collectivity. So if you bear in mind this extremely important proposition, that if I urge you to build and express your own individuality, it is the same advice that I would give to those who do not agree with you. And therefore, while you build up your individuality, you also have to build up your sociability. You should be able to place your arguments in such a way as to not give offense. Yes, certainly you can give your arguments in order to be hard with them, but not to give offense. For when you give offense, the argument shifts from what it was to being a battle between two individuals. And battles, whether between individuals or countries or armies, they always lead to destruction much more than they do to creation. Now, when you're working in an office, when you're working in a factory, when you're working in a team, I think it becomes necessary that you understand that you're contributing to a collective effort, that you're contributing your individuality to the success of a collective effort and not to the destruction of the collective effort. And therefore, acquiring the ability for teamwork, acquiring the ability to adjust, acquiring the ability to accommodate, acquiring the ability to keep smiling when you are arguing, to accept defeat with grace, and to not become arrogant because of victory. My final point is that the word skills or skilling is usually used to refer to a mechanical skill or an electrical skill. That's important. Please learn whatever skills you are taught. But there is another skill, and that is the skill that is being highlighted by your campaign. It is the skill to adapt to a work culture. And it is by bringing individuality and sociability together that you acquire the ability to function in a team, to contribute to the team effort. So here we are talking about a very special kind of skilling. Skilling to be able to make your individuality contribute to a collective effort. I'm not talking about mechanical skills or technical skills. Those are important, of course, but they do not deal with either individuality or with work culture. But there is no point in being a brilliant scientist who quarrels with all his colleagues. There's no point in being a good engineer who does not get on with his colleagues. You have to be able to use your mechanical, technical, intellectual, artistic skills in a work culture in such a manner that the work gets completed. It gets completed to the satisfaction of everybody, not just the client, but also of all your co-workers. And that is what constitutes a work culture. So my very, very best wishes to all of you for succeeding in becoming individuals, for then working towards using that individuality for the common collective effort, and finally achieving what both you want and what the consensus is. I'm sure you can achieve that. My very best wishes to you. Jai Hind and Jai Congress.